You just cost me $3,000. Vincent Moretti's voice crossed Billionaire Market so quietly that every guest stopped talking to hear it. Abigail Harper stood beside the shattered bottle of Betrayal, her round cheeks burning beneath the golden chandelier light. Red wine spread across the polished marble near her sensible black shoes, soaking the edge of her cashier's apron. She had not dropped it on purpose. A laughing guest had stepped backward without looking, struck her elbow, then moved away as though she were part of the furniture. Still, no one blamed him. Their attention settled on Abigail, the chubby cashier surrounded by tailored suits, silk dresses, and watches worth more than her yearly rent. Vincent rose from the private table near the wine display. At 6 feet 4 inches, he seemed to pull the room's attention with him. His black suit fit broad shoulders built like a locked door. Dark ink covered his hands, climbed above his collar, and curved along one side of his handsome face. He did not shout. He never needed to. "I'm sorry, Mr. Moretti," Abigail said, reaching for a towel. "It won't come out of anyone's paycheck," he replied. The answer should have sounded kind, but the men beside him smiled. Vincent glanced at his cousin Julian and switched to Italian. "Move the little cashier to the slow lane. At least she will not outrun the register." A few guests laughed into their glasses. Abigail remained still for one long breath. She had spent years learning how to smile when strangers treated her size like an invitation to judge her. She knew how to make herself smaller in crowded rooms, how to apologize before anyone asked, and how to pretend cruel words had missed their target. Tonight, something inside her refused. She straightened, brushed a loose curl behind her ear, and answered in flawless Italian. "The cashier is not the person costing you money." The laughter vanished. Vincent's hand paused over his cuff. Julian's pleasant expression tightened at the corners. Abigail stepped behind her register and opened the transaction history. For 11 weeks, someone has been processing fake returns after closing. Olive oil, imported cheese, wine, always different products, always below the automatic review limit. Vincent approached the counter with measured steps. "How would you know that?" "Because I balance this drawer every night, and numbers are easier to understand than people." A nervous chuckle came from somewhere in the crowd. Abigail tapped the screen. "The refunds do not return to customer cards. They pass through 6 medical trusts, 3 retirement funds, and 1 account hidden under the code A17. Vincent's gaze sharpened. "Stop," Julian said. Abigail looked at him. "That is an unusual thing to say when I have not reached the secret part yet." This time, nobody laughed. Vincent placed both hands on the counter, not threatening her, simply closing the distance between them. "What secret?" Abigail noticed Julian glance toward the security cameras. It lasted less than a second, but it told her more than his words had. She turned the monitor so Vincent could see the final transfer. "Someone is making these payments look illegal, and they are using your private exit plan to do it." The room felt suddenly airless. Vincent's face gave nothing away, yet the muscle near his jaw shifted once. "What exit plan?" he asked. Abigail held his eyes and spoke the name printed inside the hidden account. "Project Aurelia." Every screen in Billionaire went black. The chandeliers dimmed. Then a single sentence appeared across every register in bright white letters. "Aurelia ends tonight. Trust no one." Vincent looked at Julian, then back at Abigail, and for the first time that evening, the most controlled man in Chicago seemed unsure which person in the room had just betrayed him. "Nobody leaves." Vincent's order moved through Billionaire before the emergency lights finished flickering. The front doors locked with a soft mechanical click, and every guest suddenly remembered who owned the building. Security staff collected phones while Vincent studied the message glowing across the registers. Abigail stood behind the counter, aware that Julian had moved close enough to watch her hands. "You typed that," he said. "I was busy being publicly insulted," she replied. "My schedule was full." One corner of Vincent's mouth shifted, but his attention remained on the screen. "Can you trace it?" Abigail pulled the keyboard closer. "Not while 30 people are breathing over my shoulder." Vincent turned toward the crowd. "Clear the floor." No one argued. Within minutes, the gala guests had been escorted into the adjoining dining hall, leaving Abigail with Vincent, Julian, and 3 security specialists. She opened the register logs and followed the command that had darkened every screen. The signal had not come from outside Billionaire. It had started at Terminal 6, less than 40 feet away. That lane has been closed all evening, Julian said. Abigail walked toward it, careful not to step in the spilled wine. Terminal 6 looked untouched, but a faint green light blinked beneath the card reader. She crouched, reached under the counter, and removed a device no larger than a pack of gum. Someone attached this before the event, she said. It copied employee logins and sent the message through the store network. Vincent examined the device without touching it. How long has it been there? Long enough to make me look guilty. Abigail pointed to the sticker on its back. Her employee number had been printed beneath the barcode. Julian folded his arms. Convenient. For someone, she agreed. Vincent looked from the device to Abigail. You are coming with me. That sounds less like an invitation and more like the beginning of a very bad decision. Staying here would be worse. 20 minutes later, Abigail sat inside the top-floor office of Vincent's private residence, wrapped in a cashmere coat someone had placed around her shoulders. The windows overlooked Chicago, though the city seemed far away behind the dark glass. Vincent stood across from her while a technician copied Bellamari's records onto a secure computer. Abigail reached for the silver coffee machine beside the desk and pressed the only button that looked harmless. A sharp alarm sounded. 2 security guards entered at once. Abigail lifted both hands. Foam poured over the cup and onto the counter. I was trying to make coffee, she said. Vincent dismissed the guards with a glance. That machine costs more than the wine. Then it should come with simpler instructions. This time, the sound that escaped him was almost a laugh. It vanished when the technician opened the authorization files. Each false return carried Abigail's employee number, but the final approval belonged to someone else. Vincent leaned toward the screen. His face became unreadable. Abigail followed his gaze to the digital signature, the timestamp, and the biometric verification attached to every transfer. That cannot be right, Julian said. The technician checked twice. The system accepted a fingerprint match. Abigail looked at Vincent's hand resting beside the keyboard. The authorization belonged to him. Worse, the security archive showed Vincent entering Bellamari at 2:13 that morning, alone, and using Terminal 6. Vincent had spent that hour at a public charity dinner in New York, more than 700 miles away. Yet the man on the recording had his face, his build, and every visible tattoo. Then the figure turned toward the camera and smiled directly at Abigail, as though he had known she would eventually be watching. Pause it there, Abigail said. The image froze with the false Vincent facing the camera, one hand resting beside Terminal 6. Everyone in the office watched her as though she had just spoken in another language again. Abigail leaned closer to the monitor. Play the last 5 seconds backward. The technician obeyed. The figure turned away, crossed the empty market, and disappeared beyond the wine aisle. Vincent stood behind Abigail, silent enough that she could hear the faint hum of the computer. Julian studied the screen from the other side of the desk. What are you looking for? He asked. A mistake, she replied. People always make one when they work too hard to look perfect. The video moved forward again. Abigail pointed to the dark glass of a refrigerated display case. For half a second, the figure appeared both on camera and in the reflection. His tattoo is wrong. Vincent bent closer. The ink rising along his neck looked correct on the man himself, but the reflection showed the same pattern on the same side instead of reversing it. The reflection was added after the face, Abigail said. Whoever built this copied your appearance from separate images. They understood cameras, but they forgot mirrors. The technician enlarged the frame. A thin distortion appeared around the stranger's jaw and collar. Vincent's gaze hardened with concentration rather than anger. Could someone make this from public photographs? Not this well. Abigail tapped the image of his hand. They needed close views of your fingerprints, your posture, and every visible mark. Whoever created it has spent time near you. Julian looked toward Vincent. That includes half your organization. And everyone at the gala, Abigail added. Vincent turned to the technician. Where is the original recording stored? On Bellamari's local server. The copy we received has already been compressed. Abigail pushed back from the desk. Then the original might show what the edited version is hiding. Julian objected immediately. Returning there is unnecessary. That sounded almost convincing, Abigail said. You should try it without looking at the door. Julian's eyes narrowed, but Vincent had already reached for his coat. 40 minutes later, Bellamari stood empty beneath dim security lights. The broken wine had been cleaned away, though a faint red stain remained between two marble tiles. Abigail paused beside it, remembering the laughter. Vincent noticed, but said nothing. Instead, he opened the staff entrance for her and waited until she passed through. They reached the basement server room with Julian and two security specialists following several steps behind. The metal door required Vincent's handprint, a rotating code, and a key carried by the store manager. It opened to reveal rows of humming equipment and one empty space in the center rack. The main storage unit was gone. Someone removed it after we left, the manager said. Abigail crouched near the vacant shelf. For clean screw marks shone against the dust, but beneath them lay a torn strip of blue fabric. She recognized it at once. Every Billionaire cashier wore that exact shade. Julian picked it up with a gloved hand. Another gift with your name on it. Abigail searched the floor and noticed a tiny red light beneath the rack. Do not touch anything. She followed a narrow wire to a timer fixed behind the wall panel. It was not connected to anything dangerous. It was counting down to a remote data purge. 32 seconds remained. Abigail dropped beside the backup console and began typing. Vincent ordered everyone else out, but stayed beside her. Can you stop it? Probably. That is not reassuring. Neither was your joke, yet here we are. At 3 seconds, the timer vanished and the backup drive opened. One surviving file appeared on the screen. It contained a list of every person who had accessed Project Aurelia. Abigail read the 4 names, then looked at Vincent. There were supposed to be only 4 people in the world who knew his secret. The file showed 5, and the final name belonged to Abigail's mother, Laura Harper. Abigail read her mother's name twice before the letters began to blur. Laura Harper had been dead for 3 years, and yet the file claimed she had accessed Project Aurelia only 6 months earlier. That is impossible, Abigail said. Vincent closed the laptop before Julian could reach it. We are leaving. No one questioned him. 20 minutes later, Abigail sat in the back of a black sport utility vehicle while Chicago's lights faded behind them. Vincent occupied the seat across from her, his broad frame motionless despite every turn in the road. Julian followed in another vehicle. Abigail pressed her palms together to stop them from shaking. You knew her name. Vincent watched the dark highway beyond the window. I knew who your mother was. That is not the same answer. It is the only one I can give while we are moving. Abigail let out a breath that carried no humor. Of course, secrets apparently require better suspension. His eyes shifted toward her. The remark nearly softened the hard line of his mouth, but the moment disappeared when the driver turned onto a narrow road beside Lake Michigan. A stone house waited beyond a gate, hidden among tall pines and nearly a mile from its closest neighbor. Inside, the rooms were warm but spare, as if someone had prepared them for people who never arrived. Vincent led Abigail into a study overlooking the water. There were no guards in the room, no cameras she could find, and no Julian. Vincent opened a wall safe and removed a thin folder. Aurelia is not an account, he said. It is an exit. He spread documents across the desk. Billionaire Market appeared beside shipping companies, restaurants, construction firms, and medical clinics. Abigail recognized many of the names. Thousands of ordinary employees depended on them. For 6 years, I have been separating legitimate businesses from everything my family built illegally, Vincent continued. When Aurelia is activated, ownership moves into employee trusts. Retirement accounts become protected. Medical coverage remains funded. No rival family can claim the companies, and no Moretti can take them back. Abigail studied his face. The man feared across Chicago had quietly designed a way to surrender his own power. Why hide it? Because men who profit from dependence do not celebrate freedom. He placed another page before her. It showed the same medical trusts she had discovered at Billionaire. None of the money had been stolen. Someone had redirected the payments so they would appear criminal during a federal review. They want Aurelia shut down, she said, or they want you blamed for using it to launder money. Vincent's gaze held hers. Both outcomes leave the businesses unprotected. Abigail looked toward the dark lake. And my mother? He opened the folder to a photograph taken years earlier. Laura stood outside a warehouse wearing a yellow safety vest, younger than Abigail remembered, her smile wide beneath the summer sun. Beside her stood Vincent, barely more than a teenager. Abigail touched the edge of the picture. You knew her. She worked for my father. Doing what? Vincent crossed to a cabinet and poured water into 2 glasses. His hand remained steady, but he set hers down with unusual care. She discovered that someone was falsifying safety reports and moving money through injured workers' claims. She brought the evidence to me because she did not trust anyone else. Abigail felt the room tighten around her. My mother told me the warehouse fire was an accident. Vincent looked at the photograph instead of her. That was what she needed you to believe. Abigail pushed away from the desk. You paid her medical bills. It was not a question. Through a foundation. Because your family hurt her? His silence lasted 1 heartbeat too long. Abigail's eyes dropped to the access date beside Laura's name. 6 months earlier. 3 years after her death. Who used her identity? Vincent reached beneath the last document and removed a sealed envelope. Abigail recognized the handwriting immediately. It belonged to her mother. Her name was written across the front. Vincent placed it between them but did not release it. Your mother did not discover Project Aurelia, he said. She helped create it. Abigail took the envelope from Vincent, but her fingers refused to open it. Her mother's handwriting belonged on grocery lists, birthday cards, and the notes she used to hide inside Abigail's lunch bag. It did not belong inside a locked safe owned by Vincent Moretti. How long have you had this? She asked. 3 years. The answer landed harder than she expected. You kept a letter from my dead mother for 3 years? Vincent stayed beside the desk, his shoulders squared, though his eyes no longer carried the cold certainty she had seen at Billionaire. She made me promise to give it to you only if Aurelia was compromised. Abigail tore the envelope before she could lose her nerve. The letter was brief. Laura wrote that she had discovered false injury claims and unsafe conditions at a Moretti warehouse. She had also learned Vincent was quietly trying to separate innocent workers from the family's criminal operations. She helped him design the first employee trust, then insisted her name be removed before anyone could use Abigail against her. The final sentence made Abigail lower the page. Do not judge him by the name he inherited. Judge him by what he gives up when no one is watching. She trusted you, Abigail said. For a while. What changed? Vincent crossed to the window. Beyond the glass, wind moved across Lake Michigan in pale silver lines. The warehouse fire. Abigail's grip tightened around the letter. Vincent explained that Laura had found a forged safety report carrying his father's signature. Before she could deliver the original files, the warehouse caught fire during an overnight electrical failure. She survived, but the damage to her lungs never fully healed. Was it an accident? Abigail asked. I believed it was. Your mother did not. He opened another folder and placed a copy of the safety report beside the letter. She thought someone wanted the evidence destroyed. Abigail studied the signature. The shape looked confident, almost elegant, but one detail bothered her. The final stroke leaned left while every other signature in the file leaned right. This was traced, she said, not copied. Someone practiced it. Vincent watched her compare the pages. My father denied signing it until the day he died. And you believed him? I believed he was capable of many things. Carelessness was not one of them. Abigail looked up. That is a very polished way to describe a terrible parent. His mouth moved faintly. You make honesty sound impolite. It usually is. She reached for the glass of water, caught the sleeve of her blouse on the desk corner, and pulled 3 folders onto the floor. Papers scattered around her shoes. Abigail closed her eyes. I would like the record to show that I expose financial conspiracies better than I stand near furniture. Vincent crouched to help her. Their hands reached for the same photograph, and both stopped. For one quiet moment, the distance between them felt smaller than it had any right to be. Then Abigail noticed the image. Laura stood outside the warehouse beside Vincent and a third man whose face had been partly hidden by sunlight. A silver ring marked with the Moretti crest rested on his hand. Abigail turned the photograph over. Her mother had written one sentence on the back. Vincent did not start the fire. Asked Julian why he was there. Vincent read the sentence on the back of the photograph without moving. Abigail watched the muscles in his forearm tighten beneath the ink, the only sign that her mother's words had reached him. Call Julian, she said. He is already on his way. Vincent turned the photograph face down. You knew he would come here? This house sends an alert whenever the safe opens. Abigail stared at him. You invited the man my mother warned me about. I invited the man who needs to explain himself. Headlights swept across the study windows less than 10 minutes later. Julian entered alone, removed his coat, and placed it neatly over a chair. His attention settled on the scattered files, then on the photograph between them. "Laura always did prefer dramatic timing," he said. Abigail rose. "My mother was injured in that warehouse, and you were there." Julian did not deny it. He walked to the desk and studied the forged report. "I arrived because she called me." "Why would she call you?" "Because Vincent was 19, his father controlled half the city, and Laura needed someone who understood what would happen if she accused him openly." Vincent remained near the window. "You never told me." Julian faced him. "You were already planning to challenge your father. One more accusation would have gotten you removed before Aurelia existed." Abigail pressed both palms against the desk. "Did you start the fire?" Julian's gaze returned to her, steady but not offended. "No. I moved your mother out through a loading entrance after the alarms failed. Then I destroyed the copy of the report she carried." Vincent took one deliberate step forward. "You destroyed her evidence." "I protected the only witness." Julian opened his phone and displayed a list of names. The signature belonged to a contractor working for the Falcone family. They were using unsafe warehouses, false medical claims, and Moretti accounts to build a case that could collapse every legitimate business attached to us. Abigail studied the list. Hundreds of employees appeared beside addresses, spouses, and children. Why hide this for years? Because truth without protection is only another weapon. Julian slid the phone toward her. If Vincent activates Aurelia now, the Moretti name loses control of those businesses in a single night. The Falcones move in the next morning. They already know which families will refuse them. Abigail looked at Vincent. His face had gone still, but his eyes stayed. "On the names, you said Aurelia would free them." "It will," he answered, "if the transition survives." Julian reached into his coat and placed a small drive beside Laura's letter. "This contains the Falcone plan, payment records, and the names of officials they bought. It also contains proof that someone inside Vincent's federal contact team has been feeding them information." Vincent did not touch it. "What do you want?" "Delay Aurelia for 30 days. Let me dismantle their leverage first." "And if 30 days becomes 30 years? Abigail asked. Julian gave her a tired smile. "That is why I brought the choice to you." The room seemed colder. Abigail understood then that he had not come to threaten them. He had come to make her responsible for whatever happened next. If she supported Vincent, innocent families might be exposed. If she supported Julian, the empire could remain alive under another excuse. Vincent looked at her, not demanding an answer, not protecting her from it. For the first time, he was giving her equal weight in a decision that could change thousands of lives. Abigail reached for the drive, but before her fingers touched it, every light in the house went dark. A calm voice sounded through the security system. "Emergency breach detected. Federal access code accepted." Julian's expression changed. "That code belongs to Mara Keene." Vincent moved toward the door. Abigail caught his sleeve. On the black screen of Julian's phone, one new message appeared beneath the list of families. "Do not trust Mara. She already sold the exit." "The house is no longer ours," Vincent said as the locks began opening by themselves. One door clicked, then another, the sound traveling through the dark rooms like a countdown. Julian pocketed the drive. Abigail kept hold of Vincent's sleeve. "That is a strange sentence to hear from the man who owns everything." "Not everything," he replied. A panel beside the fireplace slid open, revealing a narrow service passage. Vincent guided Abigail inside while Julian entered behind them and sealed the opening. The tunnel smelled of stone and cold lake air. Small lights glowed along the floor, leading downhill beneath the property. "Where does this go?" Abigail asked. "A boathouse half a mile north." "You have a secret tunnel to a boat." "My family believed preparation was a virtue. Most families prepare by buying extra batteries." Julian almost smiled, but his attention stayed on the message warning them about Mara. At the end of the passage, they entered a quiet boathouse hidden beneath a wooded slope. A plain fishing boat waited beside the dock. Vincent helped Abigail aboard, then removed his suit jacket and placed it around her shoulders before starting the engine. The gesture was so natural that she did not know how to respond. She settled for, "You understand that I already have a coat. That one is wet. So your solution is to make yours wet. My solution is to keep you warm." He looked ahead before she could answer. The boat crossed the black water without lights. Chicago shimmered miles away, bright and unaware. Julian used a secure phone to contact someone he trusted, but every number went unanswered. Mara has frozen the network, he said. Accounts, safe properties, transportation. She used federal authority to isolate us. Abigail turned toward Vincent. Why does a federal agent have that much access to your life? Vincent reduced the engine as they approached an abandoned marina. Because I gave it to her. Inside a weathered office, he opened a locked cabinet and removed a folder marked with a Department of Justice seal. Abigail read the first page while Julian watched from the doorway. The document promised protection for Billionaire employees, their families, and every worker connected to Aurelia. In return, Vincent would provide records against the Moretti organization and accept responsibility for the businesses that could not be made legitimate. There was no immunity clause for him. No protected identity. No quiet escape. Abigail looked up. You plan to send everyone else to safety and take the consequences alone. Vincent rested one hand on the desk. The agreement prevents innocent people from being charged for decisions they never made. It also puts you in federal prison. That was always part of the cost. She closed the folder with more force than necessary. You built thousands of people an exit and forgot to include yourself. His eyes lowered to her hand on the file. I did not forget. The answer stripped the anger from her voice. Abigail stepped closer, close enough to see the weariness he had hidden beneath discipline. My mother helped you create Aurelia because she believed people could choose a different life. Did that belief apply to everyone except you? Vincent said nothing. His thumb brushed a drop of lake water from the sleeve of the jacket around her shoulders. The touch lasted only a moment, but neither of them moved away. Julian's phone vibrated, breaking the stillness. He read the message, and the remaining color left his face. Mara has scheduled the Aurelia transfer for midnight, he said. She is activating it early. Vincent checked the wall clock. They had 43 minutes. Abigail reopened the agreement and noticed a handwritten addition beneath Mara's signature. The transfer would release the employee trusts, but it would also send Vincent's sealed confession directly to federal prosecutors. Then Julian turned his phone toward them. A second message had arrived from Mara. Bring Abigail to me, or Vincent Moretti loses his freedom tonight. She does not get to trade me for you, Abigail said, setting Mara's message beside the agreement. Vincent reached for the phone, but Abigail covered it with her hand. You were about to say no in a deep, frightening voice, then make the decision without me. That was the general plan. It needs work. Julian checked the marina windows while the wall clock moved toward midnight. 38 minutes remained before Aurelia activated. Abigail studied Mara's demand again. The agent did not ask for the drive, the confession, or Vincent's signature. She asked for Abigail. That meant Mara believed the cashier possessed something more valuable than either man understood. My mother's letter, Abigail said. Mara knows Laura helped build Aurelia. She thinks my mother left me a key. Vincent's attention sharpened. Did she? My mother hid emergency cash inside a flour container and important papers behind expired coupons. Subtlety was not our family gift. She remembered the old recipe box still sitting in her apartment kitchen, untouched since Laura's death. One card had always seemed strange, a recipe for Italian wedding soup written entirely in numbers. Vincent called for a vehicle, but the Moretti network remained frozen. Julian found an aging delivery van behind the marina office, its side painted with a cheerful blue fish. 10 minutes later, the most feared man in Chicago sat behind the wheel of Captain Benny's fresh catch, while Abigail tried not to laugh. The hat would complete the look, she said, pointing to a faded captain's cap on the dashboard. I am reconsidering your protection. You mocked me in Italian. This is balance. Vincent placed the cap on his head for exactly 2 seconds before handing it to her. The small surrender warmed something inside Abigail that fear had not managed to freeze. They reached her apartment with 19 minutes left. Vincent entered first, checked each room, then stood awkwardly in a kitchen barely large enough for his shoulders. Abigail opened a cabinet, moved 3 bags of flour, and found the recipe box. Her elbow caught a wooden spoon, which struck a pan, which knocked a plastic bowl onto Vincent's head. He lifted it away and looked at her. Your kitchen is more dangerous than mine. My appliances do not summon armed security. She found the soup card beneath her mother's handwriting. Rows of numbers covered the back. Vincent recognized them as trust identification codes, but one sequence was incomplete. Abigail realized the missing digits were dates from her childhood, birthdays, school plays, and the day Laura first took her to Bellamari. She entered them into Julian's secure tablet. A hidden Aurelia administrator page opened. Laura had named Abigail as the independent trustee, the only person outside the Moretti family able to delay or complete the transfer. Vincent stared at the screen, then at her. Mara cannot activate Aurelia without you. That explains the invitation. The clock showed 7 minutes. For a moment, neither moved. Vincent removed the captain's hat from Abigail's curls and set it on the counter. His fingers lingered near her. Temple, careful and uncertain. I should never have spoken about you the way I did. No, you should not have. I saw a cashier. I did not see you. Abigail's smile faded into something softer. You are seeing me now. He leaned closer but stopped, leaving the choice between them. Abigail closed the distance and kissed him once, gently, with no promise beyond that moment. When they parted, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. The tablet chimed. Someone had entered the administrator page from a second location. Abigail checked the access record and felt her breath catch. Mara had not discovered Laura's key tonight. She had used it 6 months earlier under Laura Harper's stolen identity. Then a live camera window opened on the screen. Mara stood inside Bellamari beside Terminal 6, holding the original server. You have 5 minutes, she said. Come alone, Abigail, or I send Vincent's confession before Aurelia protects a single employee. Abigail entered Bellamari through the employee door with 4 minutes left on the clock and Vincent's warning pressed against her memory. Do not trust the person who controls the deadline. The market looked nothing like the glittering gala she had left hours earlier. Half the lights were off, the wine display stood bare, and every register glowed with the same white countdown. Mara Keene waited beside Terminal 6 in a gray coat, one hand resting on the original server. You came alone, she said. That was the condition. Abigail placed her purse on the counter. Vincent's small listening device remained hidden inside the lining, close enough to carry every word to the delivery van parked 2 blocks away. You used my mother's identity. Mara's face tightened. I used the access she created. A dead woman cannot give permission. A dead woman cannot watch everything she built collapse. The timer reached 3 minutes. Mara opened a federal report on the nearest screen. It showed raids scheduled across Chicago, hundreds of employees listed as possible participants, and every Aurelia trust marked for seizure. Vincent believed his confession would protect them, Mara said. My supervisors planned to take the businesses first and decide who was innocent later. By the time the courts finished, the workers would have nothing left. Abigail read the dates. The operation had been approved 6 months earlier, the same week Laura's stolen credentials first appeared. So you delayed, Aurelia? I redirected enough money to trigger an internal review. I needed Vincent to stop before he handed the government every key. And the false video? Mara glanced at the security cameras. A warning. He listens only when danger wears his face. Abigail almost admired the logic, which made it more frightening. Mara had not betrayed Vincent for money. She had decided she understood his plan better than he did. You sent information to Julian, Abigail said. He knew the families at risk. I gave him names, not access codes. Mara's voice lowered. Someone on my team copied the files and sold them to the Falcons. By the time I found out, they already knew about you. The countdown reached 90 seconds. Mara turned the server toward Abigail. Delay the transfer for 30 days. Vincent keeps his freedom, the trusts remain hidden, and I remove the people who sold us out. Abigail studied the confession scheduled for release. The digital seal looked official, but the verification number ended with an uneven spacing. She had seen the same defect in the false returns. You cannot send it, she said. Mara's eyes narrowed. What? This is not Vincent's confession. It is a copy built from the Bellamari records. The checksum does not match the federal agreement. Abigail smiled despite the fear pressing beneath her ribs. You brought me here because you cannot unlock the real file without my mother's key. The countdown stopped at 42 seconds. Somewhere inside the store, a lock disengaged. Mara looked toward the entrance, genuinely surprised. Abigail heard Vincent's voice through the tiny receiver hidden in her purse. Leave now. Before she could move, every register changed to a live map of Chicago. Red marks appeared over Moretti businesses, homes, and employee addresses. A new message filled the screens. The Falcons have the list. A slow clap sounded from the darkened dining hall. Julian stepped into the light, carrying Laura's drive and wearing the tired expression of a man who had reached the decision he feared most. Mara was right about one thing, he said. Vincent cannot save everyone while he is trying to save you. The employee doors locked behind Abigail. Julian looked directly toward the camera Vincent was using to watch them. She is coming with me, cousin. This time, you do not get to choose. Julian did not touch Abigail as he led her through Bellamari's private service corridor, but every locked door made his intention clear. Mara remained beside Terminal 6, watching them leave with the expression of someone who had lost control of her own plan. Outside, a black sedan waited beneath the loading dock lights. Abigail climbed into the back seat and found Laura's drive resting between them. My mother trusted Vincent, she said. Your mother trusted the idea behind him, Julian replied. People are not ideas. The car crossed downtown and stopped beside the Marlowe Theater, a Moretti property abandoned for nearly 20 years. Inside, faded gold curtains hung above rows of empty red seats. Julian switched on the stage lights and opened Laura's drive on a small laptop. Hundreds of names filled the screen, each connected to a Moretti business, a home address, and a family member. These are the people Aurelio was supposed to protect, he said. The Falcons have the same list. The moment Vincent gives up control, they will offer every manager a choice. Cooperate, leave, or watch the business disappear. Abigail studied the records. Julian had not invented the danger. That made his betrayal harder to dismiss. You could have told him. I did. He heard fear and called it resistance. Julian moved down the list with practiced care. Vincent believes sacrifice makes a decision moral. Sometimes sacrifice only leaves other people to clean up the damage. And taking me fixes that. It forces him to value one life more than his plan. Abigail looked toward the dark balcony. You are testing whether he loves me. I am testing whether he can still be reasoned with. A side door opened. Vincent entered alone, his black coat carrying drops of rain. He did not rush toward Abigail or threaten Julian. He stopped at the edge of the stage and looked first at the list of families, then at her. Are you all right? Abigail nodded. Julian held out his hand. The Aurelia administrator key. Vincent removed a small metal token from inside his coat. You release her first. You know I will not harm her. I know you already used her. The words struck Julian more deeply than anger would have. His hand lowered for a moment. Abigail saw regret move across his face, then disappear beneath duty. Give me the key, Julian said. I will delay the transfer, protect the families, and return control when the Falcone threat is gone. Control is never returned, Vincent answered. It is only taken by someone else. He crossed the stage and placed the token in Julian's palm. No trick, no bargaining, no attempt to save the empire he had spent 6 years preparing to surrender. Abigail understood the choice before Julian did. Vincent had traded Aurelia for her. Julian inserted the token into the laptop. The screen rejected it. Invalid key, he said. Abigail reached into her coat pocket and removed the real access card. My mother did not choose me because I was easy to control. Julian stared at her. What did you do? I sent the complete financial record to 12 independent attorneys, 3 employee trustees, and 2 investigative reporters before we left Bellamari. Vincent looked at her, surprise breaking through his restraint. Abigail continued. The audit started the moment you opened Laura's drive. No one can hide the money now, and no one person can stop the transfer. For the first time, Julian looked defeated rather than dangerous. Then the theater lights brightened by themselves. Every exit sign turned red. A man's voice came through the old speaker system. Thank you for gathering the final key holders in one room. The screen changed from the employee list to a live camera view of the theater lobby. Matteo Falcone stood beyond the locked doors with city officials, private attorneys, and several frightened Bellamari managers beside him. He smiled toward the camera. Now let us decide who truly owns their future. Matteo Falcone entered the theater as though he had already purchased the applause. 2 city officials followed him, along with 3 attorneys and a group of Bellamari managers whose faces showed more fear than loyalty. No one truly owns a future, Matteo said. They borrow it from the person powerful enough to protect it. Vincent stepped between Abigail and the aisle, not with aggression, but with the quiet certainty of a man placing himself where danger would have to pass first. You brought witnesses, he said. I brought the people your little experiment abandoned. Matteo gestured toward the managers. Each carried a contract offering protection under Falcone control. Refusal meant canceled leases, frozen credit, and investigations arranged through officials already standing in the room. Julian stared at the documents and finally understood how carefully the trap had been built. Matteo had never needed to seize Aurelia. He only needed frightened employees to surrender it willingly. Sign tonight, Matteo told them, and your store's open tomorrow. Abigail moved to the laptop. That is generous, except for the part where they lose everything 6 months later. Matteo's smile thinned. She opened one of the contracts and pointed to a clause buried near the end. The businesses would remain under employee management only until an undefined financial emergency occurred. Falcone himself controlled the company authorized to declare that emergency. You are not protecting them, Abigail said. You are lending them their own jobs until you decide to collect. One manager lowered his pen. Then another did the same. Matteo looked toward the officials, but Julian crossed the stage and placed Laura's drive beside the laptop. The payment records are on there, he said. Every permit, every false inspection, every public office you purchased. Matteo's confidence faltered. You would destroy your own family to stop me? Julian glanced at Vincent. I nearly destroyed it by believing control was the same as protection. Abigail connected her access card. The screen displayed the employee trusts, but the ownership column no longer carried Vincent's name. It carried thousands of names, from cashiers and drivers to cooks and janitors. Matteo stepped closer. Reverse it. Vincent's answer was almost gentle. It cannot be reversed. He revealed that the legal transfer had been completed months earlier. Aurelia was never waiting for his permission. The midnight process only released the public records and separated the final accounts. The false refunds, the stolen identity, and the threats had all been attempts to stop a transfer that had already happened. You were fighting for an empire that no longer belonged to me, Vincent said. The managers began tearing their contracts. The officials moved toward the exit, but the theater doors opened before they reached them. Mara entered with federal investigators and independent attorneys Abigail had contacted. There were no raised voices and no dramatic struggle. Only documents, recorded statements, and the slow collapse of certainty on Matteo's face as every choice he had arranged returned to him as evidence. Abigail looked at Vincent, expecting relief. Instead, he removed the Moretti ring from his hand and placed it on the edge of the stage. Mara approached him with the original federal agreement. The employee trusts are protected, she said. Your cooperation will be recorded. Vincent signed the final page. Abigail understood before anyone explained it. The businesses were free, Matteo's leverage was gone, and the families were safe, but Vincent's confession still carried consequences. Mara asked him to come with her. Abigail reached for his hand. His fingers closed around hers for one brief moment, warm and steady. Do not follow me, he said quietly. Then he looked at her, as though memorizing the woman he had once failed to see. Build the life your mother wanted you to have. He released her hand and walked toward the open doors, leaving Abigail beneath the stage lights with his family ring, a liberated empire, and no promise that he would ever return. 7 months passed before Abigail saw Vincent without a glass wall between them. During that time, Billionaire changed from a company people feared losing into one they finally understood they owned. Cashiers attended. Board meetings. Drivers voted on benefits. Store managers reviewed contracts with attorneys Abigail selected herself. She finished the accounting degree she had abandoned years earlier and accepted the position of chief financial officer only after the employees approved her by a vote. Still, every morning, Vincent's ring rested beside her coffee cup. He had written twice from federal custody. The first letter contained 3 sentences about the legal process and a reminder to replace the broken freezer at Billionaire. The second included no request, no promise, and one quiet line that kept her awake. I hope the life you build is large enough that you never feel required to make yourself smaller again. Abigail answered every week. She told him about payroll, her terrible attempts at homemade pasta, and the employee who named a delivery cart Aurelia. Vincent never responded to anything personal. He seemed determined to remove himself from the future he had protected. On the morning of sentencing, Abigail entered the federal courthouse wearing a navy dress and the confidence she had once borrowed from humor. Julian sat in the front row. He had surrendered control of every Moretti account and spent months giving testimony against officials connected to Falcone. Mara stood near the prosecution table, no longer acting as Vincent's handler. She had admitted using Laura's identity and accepted disciplinary charges, but her evidence had prevented innocent employees from being pulled into the case. None of them had escaped consequence. That was what made the room feel honest. Vincent entered in a plain charcoal suit without the Moretti ring. His tattoos remained visible above his collar and across his hands, but the power surrounding him had changed. No guards waited for instructions. No one lowered a voice because he had arrived. He looked toward Abigail, and the practiced control in his face slipped for a fraction of a second. She gave him the smallest smile. He looked away first. The prosecutor reviewed the charges, then described Vincent's cooperation, the employee trusts, and the records that had exposed years of corruption. Julian spoke next. He did not call Vincent innocent. He described a man who inherited control, used it, and finally surrendered it before anyone could praise him for doing so. Mara confirmed that Vincent's confession had protected hundreds of workers from prosecution. Then Abigail was asked to speak. She walked to the front with Laura's letter folded inside her purse. Vincent once believed responsibility meant standing alone, she said. He was wrong. Responsibility means facing what you did without asking people to pretend it never happened. It also means allowing the person you became to matter. Vincent's gaze lifted. Abigail continued, I am not asking the court to erase his past. I am asking the court to recognize that he spent 6 years building a future he did not expect to share. When she returned to her seat, Vincent's hands were clasped tightly before him. The judge called a recess. In the hallway, Vincent approached her for the first time. You should not wait for me, he said. Abigail removed the ring from her purse and placed it in his palm. You still think you get to decide everything. His fingers closed around it. I may lose several years. Then you will have several years to learn how conversation works. A breath of laughter escaped him, brief and surprised. The courtroom doors reopened. Vincent looked at her as though there were 100 things he did not know how to say. Abigail touched his hand once. Go hear the truth, she whispered. The judge returned to the bench, opened the sentencing file, and announced that the court had reached a decision no one in the room expected. The judge did not erase Vincent's sentence, but she refused to ignore the life he had already changed. He received 18 months in federal custody, with credit for the 7 months he had served, followed by supervised release and permanent separation from every criminal enterprise once tied to the Moretti name. Vincent accepted the decision without protest. He looked at Abigail only once, and in that brief glance she saw relief, regret, and something gentler than either of them had known how to name. 11 months later, Abigail stood outside the federal facility beside an aging blue sedan that made a troubling sound whenever it turned left. A paper sign rested against the windshield. It read, Welcome home, terrifying coffee snob. Vincent walked through the gate carrying one small bag. He wore a plain black coat, and the family ring was no longer on his hand. His steps slowed when he saw her. You waited, he said. I lived, Abigail answered. There is a difference. She handed him a paper cup. He tasted the coffee and glanced at her. This is terrible. Good. Prison did not damage your honesty. Billionaire looked different when they arrived. The private dining area had become an employee training center. The expensive wine display now shared space with products from local family businesses. A framed copy of Aurelia's first employee trust hung near the registers, beside a photograph of Laura Harper smiling in her yellow safety vest. Vincent stopped before it. Abigail gave him time, but she did not leave him alone. Julian had begun working with federal investigators and labor attorneys, helping other businesses separate from corrupt ownership. Mara had lost her position, yet her testimony had protected dozens of workers from false charges. Matteo Falcone and the officials who supported him faced the courts with every contract and payment record exposed. Justice had arrived slowly, through signatures, testimony, and people finally refusing to remain afraid. Abigail had also changed. She no longer apologized when she entered a crowded room. She had completed her degree, built a fund for workers caring for sick family members, and learned that kindness did not require silence. Vincent began again without an office, a driver, or a title. His first legal job was at Billionaire, where Abigail handed him a cashier's apron. Starting pay is $15 an hour, she said. That seems low. Try not to destroy any $3,000 wine. He tied the apron around his broad waist and looked toward the register. Will there be training? Yes, but the coffee machine remains off limits. Months passed. Vincent learned to ask instead of command. Abigail learned that love did not require rescuing someone from every consequence. They argued, laughed, repaired trust, and built a life in ordinary pieces. One evening after closing, Vincent placed a small ring on the counter. It was not a Moretti heirloom. He had bought it with money earned from his first year of honest work. I cannot promise you an empire, he said. Abigail looked at the quiet store, the employee photographs, and her mother's name shining beneath the glass. Good, she replied. I never wanted one. He asked her to marry him, and she cried before remembering to ask whether he had kept the receipt. He had. When they locked Billionaire that night, Vincent held the door while Abigail stepped into the warm Chicago evening. He had once believed losing power would leave him with nothing. Instead, he walked beside the woman who had exposed his secrets, challenged his pride, and shown him that dignity could not be owned, only honored. The world he ruled had disappeared, but the life they earned together was finally their own.